I spent a whole year hand-stitching a quilt for my sister's baby, only for her to tell me her dog destroyed it. Then I found it for sale online for $1,200. They say you can't put a price on love, but apparently my sister Jen found one. $1,200. I spent 365 days on that quilt. It wasn't just a blanket, it was a map of our family history. I used scraps of my grandmother's old aprons, pieces of the dress I wore to my college graduation, and vintage lace I'd hunted for in thrift stores across 3 states. Every stitch was done by hand. My fingers were permanently calloused, and my eyes ached from working under a magnifying lamp late into the night. I gave it to Jen at her private gender reveal dinner. When she unwrapped it, she cried. She hugged me and whispered that it was the most meaningful thing anyone had ever done for her. She promised it would be the centerpiece of the nursery, the heirloom her daughter would keep forever. 2 weeks later, I went over to her place to drop off some maternity clothes. I looked toward the crib, expecting to see the colorful patterns. The nursery was decorated in high-end, sad beige decor, and my quilt was nowhere to be seen. "Oh, Maya," Jen said, her voice trembling as she pointed to the corner. "I am so sorry. Buster got into the nursery yesterday while I was at the store. He shredded it. It was a bloodbath of fabric and stuffing. I was so heartbroken I couldn't even show you. I had to throw it in the dumpster before I started sobbing again." Buster is her golden retriever. He's a goofball, but he's never been a destructive chewer. Still, I felt my heart break. A year of my life gone in one afternoon. I told her it was okay, that it was just an object, and I even bought her a coffee to cheer her up. But something felt off. Jen didn't seem sad. She seemed distracted. And she was carrying a brand new butter-soft leather diaper bag that I knew cost more than my monthly mortgage. That night, I was scrolling through a high-end, curated vintage boutique site I follow for inspiration. My thumb stopped mid-scroll. There it was. My quilt. The description read, "One-of-a-kind, artisan-crafted heritage quilt. Never used $1,200. The photos were taken in a room with the exact same crown molding and gray paint as Jen's nursery. You could even see the edge of her sad beige rug in the corner of the frame. The air left my lungs. She didn't lose it to a dog. She sold it to a stranger to fund her aesthetic. I didn't call her. I didn't scream. Instead, I pulled out my credit card. Under a fake name and a different shipping address, I bought my own work back. The package arrived today. It's pristine. No dog hair, no bite marks, just the faint scent of Jen's expensive vanilla candles. Attached to the inside of the box was the original digital receipt from the boutique, listing the seller's encrypted ID, which, thanks to a little forgot password sleuthing, I confirmed was linked to Jen's secondary email. Tomorrow is her big family baby shower. Everyone will be there, our parents, our aunts, and all her influencer friends. Jen is expecting me to bring a box of diapers and a smile. Instead, I'm bringing the quilt. I'm bringing the receipt. And I'm going to make sure everyone sees exactly what Jen thinks family is worth. The night before the baby shower, I didn't sleep. I sat on my floor with the quilt spread out over my lap. It felt heavier now, weighted down by the sheer audacity of what Jen had done. Every time I touched a patch of Grandma's apron or the silk from my graduation dress, I felt a physical sting of betrayal. She hadn't just sold fabric. She'd sold our memories to buy a leather bag that would be out of style by next season. I looked at the receipt from the boutique, $1,200. After the site took its commission, Jen probably walked away with a clean grand. To her, that was a win. To me, it was the price of our relationship. The baby shower was held at a posh tea room in the city. When I arrived, the room was a sea of pastel balloons, white lilies, and women in floral dresses sipping mocktails. Jen was in the center of it all, glowing in a silk maternity gown, looking like the picture of motherhood and grace. "Maya, you made it," she chirped, waddling over to give me a hug. She smelled like that expensive vanilla again. "I was worried you'd still be sad about the quilt accident. I'm still just devastated." She actually managed to squeeze out a tiny fake pout. It was a masterpiece of acting. "I'm managing," I said, my voice as flat as I could keep it. "In fact, I found something even better than a replacement. I've been very busy this week, Jen. I wanted to make sure you had the perfect gift for the nursery." "Oh, you're too sweet. Just put it on the gift table. We're doing the opening in 20 minutes. I walked over to the gift table. It was piled high with high-end strollers, designer baby clothes, and organic wooden toys. I placed my box, wrapped in plain, unassuming brown paper, right at the very front. I wanted it to be the grand finale. As the opening ceremony began, our mother sat next to Jen, beaming. "Jen has worked so hard on the nursery," Mom told the group. "It's a shame about that beautiful quilt Maya made, but accidents happen. Buster is just a puppy at heart." A few of the aunts sighed sympathetically. I caught Jen's eye. She gave me a little oops shrug and a wink. She thought she'd gotten away with it. She thought I was the grieving artist who had accepted her loss. Jen started tearing through the gifts. She cooed over a $400 cashmere baby blanket. She cheered for a motorized swing. Finally, she reached my box. "And this one is from my big sister Maya," Jen announced to the room. She's the most creative person I know. Even after the dog destroyed her hard work, she still found the heart to bring something else. She ripped the brown paper open. The room went silent. The quilt tumbled out, its vibrant colors clashing violently with the sad beige aesthetic of the room. The aunts gasped. My mother's jaw dropped. Jen's face didn't just go pale. It turned a sickly shade of gray. Her hands froze on the fabric. She knew those stitches. She knew the exact pattern of the lace. Wait, Mom whispered, leaning forward. Maya, did you make a second one? In a week? No, Mom, I said, standing up. I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. There's only one quilt like that in the world. Jen told me the dog chewed it up and she threw it in the dumpster. But strangely enough, I found it listed on a curated vintage boutique site for $1,200 2 days later. The room was so quiet you could hear the bubbles popping in the champagne flutes. Maya, don't be ridiculous, Jen stammered, her voice high and thin. That's a coincidence. Someone must have copied your design. I thought that too, I said, reaching into my purse. So I bought it. I used a fake name and had it shipped to my friend's house. And wouldn't you know it? The seller's return address on the shipping label was your house, Jen. And the scratches on the box? They aren't from Buster. They're from the post office. I pulled out the printed receipt and the shipping manifest, holding them up for the room to see. You didn't throw it away. You sold a year of my life to buy that diaper bag sitting in your car. You lied to my face while I was mourning the loss of a family heirloom. My mother looked at Jen, then at the quilt, then back at Jen. Jennifer, is this true? It was an accident. Jen suddenly shrieked, the mask finally slipping. I didn't think she'd find out. We need money for the baby, Mom. Everything is so expensive, and that quilt was it didn't even match the nursery. It was sitting in a closet. Why let $1,200 sit in a closet when we need a high-end car seat and a travel system? Because I made it for your daughter, I snapped. I made it with Grandma's clothes. You sold our grandmother's history for a car seat? One of Jen's influencer friends cleared her throat awkwardly and started checking her phone. The saintly mother-to-be image was shattered. You're so dramatic, Maya, Jen yelled, standing up and pointing a trembling finger at me. It's a blanket. You gave it to me! That means it was mine to do what I wanted with. You're trying to ruin my baby shower because you're jealous that I'm the one starting a family, and you're just the crafty sister who lives alone. The room inhaled sharply. That was the low blow she'd been saving. You're right, Jen, I said, picking up the quilt from her lap. I didn't crumble. I didn't cry. I felt lighter than I had in years. It is mine to do what I want with, because I bought it back. It's legally my property again. I folded the quilt neatly over my arm. I'm taking this back. And the $1,200 I spent to rescue it? Consider that your birthday, Christmas, and baby gifts for the next 10 years. Since you love money so much, I've saved you the trouble of having to sell anything else I give you, because I'm never giving you anything ever again. I turned to my mother, who was looking at Jen with a look of pure disappointment I'd never seen before. I'll see you at home, Mom. I walked out of that tea room with my head held high, the weight of the quilt on my arm feeling like a badge of honor. Behind me, I could hear Jen starting to wail about how I ruined her day, but for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I wasn't the crafty sister anymore. I was the sister who finally knew her own worth. The drive home from the tea room was the quietest 30 minutes of my life. The quilt sat in the passenger seat, smelling faintly of the expensive boutique's packaging and Jen's signature perfume. It felt like a rescued hostage. I expected my phone to explode immediately. I expected Jen to call me screaming, or for my mother to demand I come back and fix the scene I'd made. But for the first hour, there was nothing but a haunting silence. Then, the family group chat pinged. It wasn't an apology. It was a photo Jen had posted to her Instagram story, which someone had shared to the group. It was a picture of her sitting on her sofa, holding her pregnant belly, with red, puffy eyes. The caption read, "Some people would rather ruin a mother's joy than offer a little grace. Devastated that my own sister chose a public tantrum over family. Mental health is real, y'all. Please be kind." My blood boiled. She was already flipping the script. She wasn't a thief. She was a victim of my instability. My Aunt Sarah was the first to chime in on the group chat. "Maya, that was a bit much, wasn't it? To do that in front of her friends? She's 8 months pregnant. Whatever she did with the quilt, was it worth stressing her out like that? Stress is dangerous for the baby." Then came my cousin, Leo. "Yeah, money comes and goes. But you humiliated her. Maybe just apologize so we can move on?" I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the screen. They were gaslighting me. They were acting as if her selling a priceless family heirloom and lying to my face was just a minor mistake, while my standing up for myself was a public tantrum. I didn't reply. I took a deep breath and opened my laptop. I had a digital trail, and it was time to use it. I didn't just have the receipt for the quilt. I had the original boutique seller profile page I had screenshotted before it was taken down. On that profile, Jen, under her username Jen Lux, hadn't just sold my quilt. I scrolled through her sold history. My heart sank. Last Christmas, I had given my mother a set of hand-knitted, pure cashmere sweaters. I'd spent $400 on the yarn alone. There they were, sold for $150 each. The vintage brooch my Aunt Martha had given Jen for her bridal shower, sold for $200. The handmade rocking chair our uncle had spent months carving for the nursery, listed but price dropped because she wanted a quick sale. Jen wasn't just needing money for the baby, she was running a high-end fence for family gifts. She was treating our love like a retail inventory. I didn't send these to the group chat. Not yet. I knew if I did, they'd call me a stalker. I needed to be smarter. That evening, my mother knocked on my door. She looked exhausted. She walked in and sat at the table looking at the quilt. "She's hysterical, Maya," Mom said softly. "Her husband, Mark, is furious at you. He says you've put Jen's health at risk. He's threatening to ban you from the hospital when the baby comes." "Did he say anything about the $1,200, Mom?" I asked. "Or the fact that she lied about Buster destroying it?" "She says she was embarrassed," Mom sighed. "She says she felt pressured to have this perfect nursery for her followers, and your quilt? It was beautiful, Maya, but it was too busy. She felt like she couldn't tell you the truth without hurting your feelings. So she sold it instead? And lied for 2 weeks? While I sat here feeling guilty that my gift was too fragile for her dog, I stood up, the anger flaring again. "Mom, look at this." I turned my laptop screen toward her. I showed her the Jen Lux profile. I showed her the cashmere sweaters I'd made for her. The ones Mom had told me she stored in cedar because they were too precious to wear. My mother's face went still. She leaned in, squinting at the screen. That's my blue sweater? And the cream one. "She didn't just sell my quilt, Mom. She sold your Christmas gifts. She sold Aunt Martha's brooch. She's been doing this for a year. She's using us as her personal suppliers for her luxury lifestyle." The silence in the room was heavy. I could see the gears turning in my mother's head. She had always defended Jen. Jen was the social one, the successful one, the one who needed more support because she was sensitive. I was the strong one who could handle anything. "I told her I lost those sweaters," Mom whispered. I felt so bad. I told her I must have left them at the dry cleaners and forgotten. She comforted me. "She told me not to tell you because it would hurt your feelings." The manipulation was deeper than I ever imagined. Jen hadn't just stolen the items. She had stolen the peace of mind of the people who loved her. She had let our mother feel like she was losing her memory just to make a quick $100. "What are you going to do?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "I'm not apologizing," I said, "and I'm not going to that hospital. If Mark and Jen want to play the victim, let them. But I'm sending this link to Aunt Martha and Uncle Jim. They deserve to know where their hard work actually ended up." "Maya, it will destroy the family," Mom pleaded. "The family is already broken, Mom. Jen broke it the first time she put a price tag on a gift. I'm just the one turning on the lights so you can see the damage." That night, I sent the link to the sold history to the 4 people Jen had robbed. I didn't add a caption. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. An hour later, the group chat didn't just ping, it exploded. Aunt Martha was the first to speak, and she wasn't offering grace anymore. "Jennifer, I am looking at my mother's brooch on a resale site. Explain this. Now." The war wasn't just between me and Jen anymore. The golden child was finally being seen for what she really was, a cold-blooded opportunist. But Jen had one last card to play. At 2 a.m., I got a text from her. "You think you won? I'm in the hospital. Contractions started. If anything happens to this baby, it's on your head. I hope that blanket was worth it." The 2 a.m. text from Jen felt like a physical blow. I sat on the edge of my bed, the blue light of the phone screen illuminating the quilt draped over my chair. "If anything happens to this baby, it's on your head." Those words are designed to paralyze you. They are the ultimate weapon of a manipulator because how do you argue with a medical emergency? How do you defend yourself against the accusation that your quest for the truth caused a premature birth? I didn't sleep. By 6 a.m., the family group chat, which had been a battlefield of accusations against Jen just hours prior, had shifted into a frantic prayer circle. My Aunt Martha, who had been ready to skin Jen alive over her stolen brooch, was now posting, "Let's forget the petty things for now. The baby is all that matters. Maya, maybe you should reach out? Let's put the anger aside." The golden child effect was back in full force. The moment there was a crisis, Jen's sins were washed away by the sheer weight of her vulnerability. I was once again the bitter sister who had pushed a pregnant woman over the edge. My phone rang at 7:30 a.m. It was Mark, Jen's husband. His voice was thick with exhaustion and rage. "She's been in active labor for 5 hours, Maya. The doctors are worried about her blood pressure. I hope you're happy with yourself. You just couldn't let it go, could you? You had to have your moment at the shower." Mark, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm sorry she's in pain, but I didn't sell the quilt. I didn't lie for weeks. I didn't steal Mom's sweaters. Jen did those things. Stress is a consequence of actions, not just the people who point them out. You're unbelievable, he spat. Stay away from the hospital. Don't call. If I see you anywhere near her or my daughter, I'll have security remove you. He hung up. I spent the next 12 hours in a state of purgatory. My mother was at the hospital, sending vague updates. Still waiting. Doctors are monitoring. Jen is exhausted. I sat in my apartment staring at the quilt. I felt like a monster. Was I really that cold? Was a year of my life worth the life of my niece? But then a small, nagging doubt began to grow. Jen was a master of timing. She had fainted at her own wedding when she realized the florist had used the wrong shade of white. She had a migraine whenever it was time to help clean up after Thanksgiving. I called my friend Sarah, who works as a nurse in the same hospital system. I didn't ask for Jen's private records, I knew she couldn't give them, but I asked a hypothetical. If someone was in high-stress labor due to a family conflict, would they be allowed to be on their phone posting to Instagram? Sarah paused. Usually if it's a high blood pressure crisis, we take the phone away. We need them calm. Why? Check Jen's close friend's story, I said. A few minutes later, Sarah sent me a screenshot. Jen had posted a selfie from the hospital bed. She looked tired, yes, but she was wearing full waterproof mascara. The caption read, "The strongest people face the hardest battles. Trying to stay positive for my little girl despite the toxicity of others. Single-handedly strong." Maya, Sarah whispered over the phone. She's in the VIP birthing suite. Her vitals on the monitor in the background, which she accidentally captured, look perfectly stable. She's not in a crisis. She's in labor, which is a normal biological process, but she's using it to stage a movie. That was the turning point. I realized Jen wasn't fighting for her life. She was fighting for the narrative. She was using her daughter as a human shield to stop the family from looking into the Jen Lux resale account. I went to the hospital. I didn't go to her room. I went to the waiting room where my mother and Aunt Martha were huddled together, looking like they were at a funeral. When they saw me, Martha turned her head away. "Maya, Mark said you weren't welcome," Mom said, her eyes red. "I'm not here to see Jen," I said, sitting down across from them. "I'm here because I don't want you two to be lied to anymore." "Mom, did the doctor say her blood pressure was dangerously high?" "Mark said it was," Mom whispered. "Mark said what Jen told him to say," I replied. I pulled out my phone and showed them the selfie Jen had posted an hour ago. "Look at the monitor in the back, Mom. Look at the timestamp. She's been sitting here for 6 hours, perfectly stable, crafting captions about how toxic I am, while you two are out here crying and making excuses for her." Aunt Martha leaned in, looking at the photo. She was a retired school nurse. She saw the numbers on the screen. Her eyes narrowed. That's a resting heart rate of 72. And her BP is 115/75. That's textbook perfect. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't the silence of shock, it was the silence of a long overdue awakening. "She's using the baby," Martha whispered, a flash of her old fire returning to her eyes. "She's using her own child to make us stop asking about the brooch." Just then, the doors to the maternity ward swung open. Mark walked out, looking triumphant. He didn't see me at first. "She's here," he announced. "Little Sophie was born 10 minutes ago. Healthy, perfect, and beautiful." Mom and Martha jumped up, but as Mark saw me standing there, his face darkened. "I told you to leave, Maya." "I'm glad the baby is healthy, Mark," I said, stepping forward. "Truly. But I'm done being the villain in Jen's fairy tale. I've already spoken to the boutique owner. She's agreed to provide the full list of items Jen Lux sold over the last year, including the bank account where the money was deposited. If Jen wants to play the health crisis card to avoid the truth, that's fine. But the family needs to decide, are we going to meet the baby, or are we going to keep meeting Jen's demands for silence?" Mark looked at the three of us. He saw his mother-in-law and the aunt who had always been Jen's biggest defenders. He saw the cold, hard clarity in their eyes. "What are you talking about?" he stammered. "Ask your wife about the $1,200, I said. "And ask her why she was posting hashtags while you were out here terrified for her life." I walked toward the exit. I didn't need to see the baby yet. I didn't need a confrontation at the bedside. I had done what I came to do. I had stripped the golden child of her armor. As I reached the elevator, I heard Aunt Martha's voice echoing down the hall. "Mark, we'll see the baby in a minute. But first, you and Jen have some explaining to do about a blue cashmere sweater and a vintage brooch." I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the crafty sister or the bitter sister. I just felt like Maya. But I knew the biggest test was yet to come. Because once the baby was home, Jen would try to use her as a bargaining chip. I had to decide, was I willing to lose my niece to keep my integrity? The following week was a blur of cold silence and heated whispers. My niece Sophie was home from the hospital, tucked away in her sad beige nursery. In any other world, I would have been there, smelling her head and marveling at her tiny fingers. Instead, I was sitting at my dining room table with a stack of bank statements and a final email from the boutique owner. The Jen Lux account hadn't just been a side hustle. It was a systematic harvesting of our family's generosity. Over the last 18 months, Jen had cleared over $8,000. It wasn't just the quilt or the sweaters. It was the silver rattles from our cousins, the antique books from my father's collection, and even the high-end stroller our parents had bought her, which she'd replaced with a cheaper model and pocketed the difference. My mother came over on Thursday. She looked like she had aged 10 years in a week. She sat down and reached out to touch the quilt, which was still draped over the back of my chair. "She won't let me see the baby unless I disavow you, Maya," Mom said, her voice cracking. Mark sent a formal email to the whole family. He said that until you apologize and delete the evidence you've been circulating, no one who speaks to you is allowed near Sophie. The ultimate leverage. Jen was using a literal infant as a ransom note. "And what did you say, Mom?" I asked. "I told him that I love my granddaughter," she said, a new spark of steel in her eyes. "But I won't be lied to anymore. I told him that if Jen wants a relationship with me, it has to be built on the truth, not on a pile of stolen sweaters." I felt a massive weight lift off my chest. For the first time in our lives, my mother wasn't shielding the golden child. But Jen wasn't done. That evening, she posted a long, rambling video to her social media. She was sitting in the nursery, rocking Sophie with no makeup and artfully messy hair. She talked about family betrayal, financial bullying, and how her jealous sister was trying to ruin her first moments of motherhood over material things. She even hinted that she was considering a restraining order for her mental peace. The comments were a war zone. Her influencer friends called me a monster. But then something happened that Jen didn't expect. Aunt Martha commented, then Uncle Jim, then 3 of our cousins. They didn't scream. They just posted links. They posted the screenshots of their own gifts for sale on her Jen Lux page. They posted the receipts. Martha wrote, "We don't want an apology, Jennifer. We want the family history you sold back. You didn't just sell material things. You sold our hearts. Stop using that baby to hide from your own choices." The public mask didn't just crack, it shattered. By the next morning, Jen had deleted her entire social media presence. The perfect life was gone. 2 days later, there was a knock on my door. It was Mark. He wasn't yelling this time, he looked broken. He handed me a heavy envelope and a cardboard box. "She's gone to stay with her friend in the city for a few days," Mark said, not meeting my eyes. She admitted it, Maya, all of it. She said she felt like she couldn't keep up with the lifestyle everyone expected her to have. She thought that if she looked successful, she would be successful. She didn't think anyone would notice the things were gone. I opened the envelope. It was $1,200 in cash. Every cent I had spent to buy back my own quilt. "What's in the box?" I asked. "Everything she hadn't sold yet," he whispered. The rocking chair, some of the baby clothes, Aunt Martha's brooch. She had pulled it from the site after the shower but was too scared to give it back. I looked at the money, then at the box, then at the man who had been Jen's enforcer just days ago. "Why are you here, Mark?" "Why isn't she?" "Because she still thinks she's the victim," he said, his voice trembling. "She thinks the family is cruel for not letting it go." But I look at Sophie and I realize I don't want her growing up in a house built on lies. I'm staying with my parents for a while. We're going to counseling. Or we're getting a divorce. I don't know yet. I took the box and the money. I didn't feel a sense of triumph. I just felt a profound, hollow sadness. "Tell her I don't want an apology anymore," I said. "I just want her to be a better mother to that girl than she was a sister to me." I didn't go to see Sophie that week. I didn't reach out to Jen. I spent my Saturday at Aunt Martha's house, helping her pin the vintage brooch back onto her favorite coat. We didn't talk about the betrayal. We talked about Grandma. We talked about the future. The family is different now. It's smaller, it's quieter. There are no more power duo marketing photos or perfect family brunch posts. Jen is still in her silo of self-pity, sending the occasional guilt-tripping text that goes unanswered. But the quilt? The quilt is back where it belongs. I didn't put it in a box and I didn't give it back to Jen. A few months later, I was sitting on my porch when my mother pulled up. She had Sophie in the back seat. Mark had started bringing her over for Auntie and Grandma days, while Jen was at her therapy sessions. I walked out to the car and took the tiny, warm bundle into my arms. Sophie looked just like our grandmother. She had the same curious eyes and the same stubborn chin. I took her inside and laid her down on the sofa right on top of the handmade quilt. The vibrant colors, the scraps of history, the graduation silk, the grandmother's lace, finally looked exactly where they were meant to be. Sophie reached out a tiny hand and gripped a patch of the vintage floral fabric. She didn't care if it matched the aesthetic. She didn't care about the price tag. She just liked the warmth. I realized then that Jen was right about one thing. You can't put a price on love, but she was wrong about the reason. Love isn't expensive because of what it costs to buy. It's expensive because of what it costs to keep. I had paid $1,200 to get my quilt back, but the real cost was the sister I thought I had. It was a high price, but looking at my niece sleeping on a bed of family memories, I knew I'd finally made a sound investment. The family wasn't ruined. The rot was just removed. And for the first time in a long time, the garden was finally ready to grow.